Let's talk a little bit about foreign direct investment into Vietnam because it's a very important issue that everyone is interested in. Where is the real estate sector in terms of ranking in FDI contribution into Vietnam?
You had processing manufacturing industry at 31.8%, power and water and gas at 23%, but then the real estate sector is the third at 22.3%. So you would see that it's a very strong sector, and it is growing.
And the growth, as you said, is mainly because of the residential and retail sectors.
Yes, correct.
Have you actually seen anything in infrastructure development at all, like bridges and roads and?
Well, there is.
Obviously, not as fast as the residential. And
well, I just think the residential has sort of taken off, and it's become very popular. So I think infrastructure is trying to catch up. I mean, it's a catch-up.
Should it be the other way around, though? Infrastructure first and then...
Well, it should be, but that's in mature markets, that's what happened. The Vietnam market, all of a sudden what's happened is demand for these projects such as residential or commercial have come on immediately, and then the infrastructure is now trying to catch up. So it's a reverse situation, but that's typical of an emerging market where it's been asleep for a long time.
So you've actually seen that in other emerging markets as
well?
I
think, yeah, it is. It was the same in the early days of, say, the Philippines, Thailand, and around the region.
Have you seen any other countries in the region like Hong Kong, Taiwan, or Japan being top investors in real estate into Vietnam?
They're all here. They're all coming. There's a strong Korean presence, Japanese funds and financial institutions are here. And I think that the reason is they all see that in their own markets, which are very mature and stabilised, there is an opportunity in Vietnam because it is an emerging market.
Having said that, do you think there would be a shift of capital sources in the next 5 years in Vietnam, though?
Yeah, look, I think there is. 5 years ago, it was predominantly dominated by the local Vietnamese companies. But today, more and more foreign investors or foreign companies are investing into the market. So we can see in the next 5 to 10 years that foreign-owned companies will be a major force in this particular area of the market.
Well, that all sounds very exciting. But let's talk about the less exciting stuff, which is legal implications on the sector.
Yes.
So what is the property law of Vietnam governed by?
It's governed by a number of things, and I don't profess to be an expert on it, but they're governed by land law, housing law, planning law, construction law, law on investment, and the law on real estate business.
Is that a lot of laws altogether?
That's a lot of laws. That's a lot of laws. You know, so
does that confuse you or confuse your clients?
Well, it does. It does. It confuses me. Don't worry about the clients. Look, I think it's again, it's you have to know the market and you have to know what the current laws are and what you're getting yourself into. Foreign corporations, for example, conducting business, they have to do it under the law of investment. You know, without going into too much detail, there's two ways for foreign corporations that can acquire land use rights. They can establish a wholly owned, foreign-owned entity in Vietnam, and then that entity can enter into a lease agreement with the state authority and pay rent annually, or they can establish a joint venture with a Vietnamese entity, which then leases the land from the state. So they're the two broad ways that the foreign corporation.
Is there a chartered capital required, though?
There is. Any enterprise undertaking real estate activity has to have capital equity. I think of at least 6 billion Vietnamese dong, or $350,000 US. In addition to that, they have to have a proportion of the development in capital, at least 20% of the total invested capital. For industrial or new urban areas, for argument's sake. So, I mean, those types of ranges. So, yes, the answer in short is they do have to have capital.
Do you have to prove that the money is in the bank before you actually conduct your activities?
Well, I'd say so, yes. Yes.
Okay. What about restrictions? Are there any restrictions in terms of property ownership in Vietnam?
Well, there is there are restrictions, like there are restrictions in everywhere. There's two broad categories of ownership in real estate. There's the land use rights, and that relates to the land and entitles the holder to exclusive use and deal with the land in a specified manner. The main types of land use that may be held are allocated land. That's land allocated by the state, and this is the closest that you would get to a Western freehold title. And this allocated land can be allocated on a fixed term or an indefinite term with regards to that. And then the second half is state leased land, where the land is leased by the state, and you normally have a land use right there from say 50 to 70 years. 50 to 70 years? Yes, on a leasehold. On a leasehold. Yes. But that's probably the best that you could get as a foreigner or a foreign corporation. Well, at this point in time, yes. What happens after 50 years? It's a good question, because I don't think it's got there yet. But after 50 years, you would assume, and it still does say at the moment, the lease terms are renewable, but that is entirely up to the government departments that are running. I think it's the Department of Natural Resources and Environment or other relevant government bodies. Can you transfer your lease though in the middle of the lease term? Yes, you can. I think it's just a matter of working through that and the intricacies that go into that with regards to regulations and all of that stuff. But yes, you can. What about other markets in Asia? Do you see the same thing happening there, or are there any differences between Vietnam as a market and other Asian markets at the moment? In terms of legalities of ownership and what have you, I think the other markets are more mature in the fact that their legal system and their ownership system is more advanced than the Vietnamese system in regards to foreign entities coming in. Have you actually seen a lot of companies being able to own this sort of leasehold term in Vietnam as yet, or is it just still in the policy? Foreigners can only own one apartment for up to 50 years, or corporations can own one or more apartments, but that has to be for the specific use of their employees. So whilst it's emerging, it's still controlled, and there's still... Do you have to apply? Is there an applying process for you to do so? There is. Does it take long? Well, I don't think it's getting better. It's getting better, but there is still processes and paperwork to go through. In view of the tough period facing the high-end residential segment, investors are now turning their attention to the emerging middle class in Vietnam. According to industry reports, the last 2 quarters of 2010 have witnessed 10,000 units being launched for these first home buyers, with 80% of the supply reported for low-end consumer segments, with sale value at an average of 800 million Vietnam dong per unit. The strategic shift to the emerging middle class has paid off, with half of the above supply being consumed. Pricing-wise, the segment averages at 12 million Vietnam dong per square meter. According to industry forecast, mid and low-end residential segments will continue to see huge potentiality in Vietnam for developers and investors in the years to come. Let's talk about Vietnam in the Asia-Pacific sort of perspective. And in one of your On Point newsletter recently published by JLL, you basically said that there is an overwhelming 76% of investors looking to be net buyer into the APAC region. What are the markets that they look at? The answer was 76% yes. They were fairly distributed across the risk curve as to what they might invest in. It was interesting to note that European and Middle Eastern investors had a clear preference for core assets in the developing economies, whereas the US-based investors had US-based investors not only had the appetite for the core opportunities, but also for assets in developing nations such as Vietnam. So why Vietnam? Well, because they still see it as a relatively immature market. There's need for rapid improvement, both in infrastructure, roads and public transport, all of that sort of sector. And so because of that, they see a very big opportunity to move funds and be part of that development in the Vietnamese market.
What about other markets like Indonesia or Thailand? They are basically developing very fast as well, especially Indonesia. So why is Indonesia not on the radar?
Well, it is on the radar, but again, those particular markets are in advance of Vietnam. I mean, the attractiveness of the foreign direct investment into Vietnam is the fact that it is at the very immature stage and it is emerging and coming out.
So which markets do you think they will look at for 2011 and beyond?
Again, I still think
Would they be the same?
They are the same. I mean, the strategy of their investment will not change over the next 3 to 5 years.
If there is an advice that you would give as a managing director of Jones Lang LaSalle in Vietnam to the investing community out there in the real estate sector, what would it be?
I think from a investment point of view and strategy point of view moving forward, I think more and more they should look for professional advice and partner up more and more with people or companies who specialise in this type of investment and structures and moving their assets forward.
Well, the future looks very bright for you and your company then in Vietnam with the growth rate that you're talking about. Thank you very much, David, for being on the show with us today. Is there anything else you would like to talk to the audience about before we move?
No, just thanks very much for the opportunity to express our opinions, and it's been most enjoyable. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you. Vietnam is merely at the starting point of its development in the real estate sector. It is believed that there will be a lot more projects pouring into the country in the years to come, while the quality of development and services is slowly changing the landscape of this sector. The opportunities are there for investors who look to expand their investment portfolio in emerging economies, of which Vietnam is definitely a destination not to be missed. Let us thank David for sharing a wealth of knowledge and experience about Vietnam on the show. If you have questions for this topic, please feel free to send them to phi@insidevietnam.com.vn. For past episodes and show updates, please visit Inside Vietnam on WordPress, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I hope that Inside Vietnam has unveiled a lot of mysteries about the market through the last few shows. Keep in mind, however, that you will never cease to be amazed at what you can learn about Vietnam on each of our future episodes. So see you again in 2 weeks, and until then, start planning your journey to Vietnam.